Hey gang, today finds us at Graceland Cemetery, north side of Chicago. Epic Graceland. This place is pretty famous. If you haven't heard of it, check it out. We've been here before. This is the #1 cemetery, probably arguably in Chicago, and Rose Hill to the north, and we've got a few others, but this place has some stories. Now the story that I'm going to tell you today, we're going to go for a walk, is related to the resurrectionists back in the 1800s, well, even in the 1700s, starting out in Scotland and sweeping across our country here in the 1800s till the early 1900s actually. This was quite a common thing to do at all the big cemeteries here, was to steal bodies. Called them the ghouls. They would come at night and take the fresh corpses for the anatomists, the colleges of the doctors. So let's take a walk here in Graceland. I'm going to tell you the story of one such exhumation that happened here back in 1875. Her name was Emma Adams, a young woman. She had died of a pretty horrible death in childbirth, but what is really horrible is how she was desecrated and the odd way that it all unfolded compared to most of the other stories. I'm going to do some reading from some of the papers at the time. I really love to hear just to hear how they phrase things, and I'm going to warn you, some of this stuff that I'm going to, some of the things I'm going to quote is pretty racial. And unfortunately, back in the day, it seemed like the black people were put into the worst positions, like everything else. And of course, with the grave robbing, it was the same kind of thing. They would do the grunt work, if you will, for the white doctors. But this story really has some odd turns to it. So let's start with the Terre Haute Evening Gazette, December 2nd, 1875. And the headline is "A Suspicious Barrel." Chicago, December 1, about 4 o'clock this afternoon, an unknown expressman delivered to the United States Express in this city a barrel addressed to Mr. Thomas Green and Company, Iowa. Suspicions have been aroused. The barrel was opened and it was found to contain the bodies of a very handsome young woman, apparently about 22 years old, and a stillborn child. No clue has yet been found. And that's it for that article. Again, they're kind of piecing things together. This is when the news really first came out. Now, later, dated the same day, Chicago, December 2nd, the identity of a woman whose body was sent packed in a barrel together with an infant to the U.S. Express Company's office yesterday has not been discovered. The supposition is that she was highly respectable. She, however, does not appear to be grounded. The expressman who took the body to the office was arrested this morning and pointed out the two men who procured his help, whom the officers immediately arrested. Their names are Darrow and Jackson, carpenters on the south side. It is asserted that they have done a body snatching business at times. The body was taken from a barn on the corner of State and 20th Streets. These men stated to a Post and Mail reporter that a Dr. E.B.W. Wilder furnished the bodies to them and that they barreled them at his request. A warrant was gotten out for the arrest of Dr. Wilder, but up to the time of sending this dispatch, he has not been arrested. And then we hear from the Pittsburgh Commercial Press, which was December 11th, 1875. It said, Chicago body snatching. The remains identified. Chicago, December 3rd, the body of the woman taken from the Graceland Cemetery and sent in a barrel to the office of the United States Express Company here has been identified as that of Mrs. Emma P. Adams, wife of a prominent hardware dealer of the city, who at present is in New York. The body was buried on the 20th of November and exhumed under the direction of a Dr. Wilder last Wednesday. Warrants are out for the arrest of Wilder, but the officers have not been able to find him. Now we get to the Chicago Tribune, dated December 31st, 1875. More is coming out. A short article. Police Superintendent Hickey yesterday received a telegram announcing the capture of the body-snatching Dr. E.P. B. Wilder in Fairfield, Iowa. And in the afternoon, Detective John McCauley was dispatched to escort the young man home. Wilder's crime of resurrecting the body of Mrs. Emma P. Adams from a Graceland Cemetery created tremendous excitement some weeks ago and cannot readily be forgotten. It is hoped that he will not escape the punishment that his crime deserves, as did Dr. L.B. Wilnius, who snatched bodies by the dozen from all the cemeteries and had some 7 or 8 of them in his possession when he was arrested. Well, I have to tell you, it took a lot of research to do this, but working with Deb, we came up with the Motherlode article that really talks about a lot of the details. And again, there's going to be some racial, but we're quoting history from the time, but it's just unbelievable. I mean, when you listen to this, it's really crazy. So again, Chicago Tribune, 1875. The article starts December 31st. The headline reads, "The Resurrectionists," and the headline trickles down. Identification of the body as that of Mrs. Adams. Dr. Doe Lackey Miller's statement of the cause of her death. Mrs. Wilder declares that her husband was home that night. Again, these are the headlines. Briefs. Why he did not face the music. The effect on his brother. The cemetery officials, what did they think? And what does the law say? And by the way, we are just happened upon a pretty famous statue here that's very well known here at Graceland. But I don't want to get too distracted. You can look up Inez Clark. There's a lot of haunting stories about her, especially during the thunderstorms. She is said to leave this box and wander the cemetery, and other stories. Well, that's good. We found her quite by accident, just wandering here. But back to the story. Now we get into exactly now what happens, and it starts the article, and it's a very long article, but I'm just going to pull out some of the things that I thought were very interesting. At the beginning it says, the brother-in-law of the lady, Mr. W.O. Menda, living at number 1202 Indiana Avenue, came to the morgue, identified the body as that of Mrs. Emma P. Adams. And by the way, I don't know why her husband didn't come back from New York, but be that as it may, it says that She was the wife of William Henry Adams, who is a junior partner in the firm of Squire Brothers and Company, saddlery, hardware, and leather dealers at number 109 Lake Street. So that's on the near north side of Chicago. Mrs. Adams was about 31 years old. She was married to Mr. Adams in November 1860, her maiden name having been Emma Jane Pinoy. Now, 2 years after their marriage, a son was born to them. Tuesday morning, the 16th of November, Mrs. Adams became ill, and after 11 hours of intense suffering, died of a hemorrhage of the uterus. Family arrived a week later, a week ago Friday, her mother and sister. The funeral took place and the body was placed in a vault here at Graceland Cemetery, from which on Saturday following it was removed to the grave, whence it was resurrected by the body snatchers. A statement by Dr. Miller, doctor in charge, her primary doctor, I believe, starts by saying the patient was directed to remain quiet in a horizontal position on the back. The arrangement was that Dr. Tucker should keep watch. I was informed if the hemorrhage returned. About 12 o'clock that day, I received a telegram advising me that Dr. Tucker was with the patient, asking me to come immediately. I went to the house and found the patient sinking rapidly from hemorrhage. The only hope of saving her was the prompt delivery of the child, which was effected immediately, and the hemorrhage ceased. But the patient was too much exhausted to rally, and although restoratives were administered liberally, she died about a half hour later. Hemorrhage was the cause of death, and the hemorrhage was occasioned by the afterbirth growing over the mouth of the womb. It goes on to say, paragraphs later, about a Tribune reporter who doggedly got on this case as others, and this reporter would find Mrs. Wilder, the doctor's wife. He wasn't there, and she was defending him. He could not have done this. Same with his brother, and there's quite an exchange. Maybe I'll find a way to post this article. You should read the whole thing. Quite an exchange on the reporter, and it's just amazing how he's grilling her. And it's like, no, and all of this. So you should check that out. But anyway, the part of the article that I found most interesting is a paragraph that talks about the people that were actually out here and at the other cemeteries doing the exhumations, the resurrectionists. And the article, again, it's very racist in its tone. I'm just qualifying, I'm reading from history here, but it starts titling "A Cheeky Negro." And it says, "Perhaps the cheekiest thing of all is the action of Thomas Scott, the darky," that's right, it says this, the darky, "who resurrected the remains. He was engaged Thursday in moving the furniture of the office of Dr. Wilder and is believed could tell where he had gone. It is said that 2 other graves had been opened by him here at Graceland, but 2 other ghouls had been there before him, and nothing but empty coffins were found." I also found this interesting. They goes on to talk about the staff here at Graceland. Just imagine 1875, you're here at Graceland, and quote unquote, it says in the article that the officers of the cemetery are exceedingly mortified and worried by this occurrence and would give anything if, now that it has happened, it could be kept out of the paper. Up to this time, Graceland has enjoyed singular immunity from these forays. Calvary, the old city cemetery Rose Hill, and the paupers' burying grounds at Jefferson have been the favorite resorts. For some inexplicable reason, Graceland has been left alone. Therefore, the watchfulness of the authorities has become somewhat relaxed. It's very interesting to hear the actual words from these articles. And if we go to the Chicago Tribune to close things here, February 19th, 1876, in the next year, Dr. Wilder, the resurrectionist, came to criminal court yesterday, and guess what he got? He got the sentence of 3 months in prison. Ooh, big deal. Well, his reputation was pretty well shattered, I'm sure. But what I find really interesting as I walk here, and by the way, she's here, cannot find her. I've spent 6 months looking for her, working with people, cannot find her. Now, if any of you find her here, I know a lot of you watching come here to Graceland. Let me know, I'll post it. We'll even do another video. I'll have you come along, whoever finds it. You can come on the channel if you want. But what I find interesting is, really interesting, is that note, you know, at the end, that Rose Hill and Calvary up to the north were the favorite resorts. I love that. There were hundreds and hundreds of bodies being stolen at all these cemeteries, and not just this city, not just Indianapolis, all over the country, all over the world. It was crazy. Thousands. But you don't read about it. It's very interesting. You don't read about it. These stories are really hard to find. So, anyway, stand here and you just say, wow. As you look around, a lot of these, and the other thing, buried alive, that's not reported. How many of these people here were buried alive? I'm betting 0.5%, or maybe 0.01%. But if you take 50,000 people here, or 100,000, I mean, there has to be dozens of people that were buried alive. We're going to get into those stories too. So I really find it interesting that Rose Hill, we're going to get up there and maybe have another look around. But this was happening. But it's lost to history. It's forgotten. So anyway, wherever she is here, wherever Emma Adams is, I hope she is resting in peace.